What's up, guys? I'm Corelli. Welcome to my channel. This is episode 355 of my Cat Vibe series. And this little piece is called Derek in the Shadows. Derek is a cat. He's a black cat. He's a gorgeous black cat, frankly. And in this scene, he's camping in a shadow under a couple of trees. It's a low-angle painting. There is some interesting sunlight. It's dusk, basically. It's right before sunset. And once again, I'm using a more impressionistic approach here, if not expressionistic. Painting very loose. This panel was less unforgiving compared to the previous one. This one was easier to manage. The previous one was a nightmare, quite frankly, because it was just soaking up all the oil that I was putting on it. This one is a little easier. But, you know, in the end of the day, this was an experimental canvas. Experimental ground, experimental panels, everything was experimental about this. And, you know, I think part of doing art is that there always has to be an element of experimentation. Otherwise, what kind of art is it, right? But to be honest, you know, when you have to fight against the surface, when you have to fight against the support, when you have to fight against a challenging ground or a challenging canvas, it just doesn't help at all. It makes things a lot more difficult and unpredictable. And that's not cool, because for the most part, I'd like to experiment in the realm of you know, color and texture and those kind of things. But when you run into an area of a canvas which turns out that it's sucking out the paint or it's sucking out the oil, and now you're all of a sudden, you have this additional challenge of trying to balance things out and make sure that the painting is coherent even, it kind of sucks. Let me put it this way, it kind of sucks. So I'd rather have a uniform surface which I can count on, and then I will experiment on top of that. That's the kind of experimentation that I would really like to engage in. So I'm trying to make this composition more dynamic than it really was to begin with, and I'm exaggerating Derek himself a little bit. He has beautiful yellow eyes. He's a very beautiful cat. And he's large. And he's in a shadow. Among all of these leaves and grass, which has all sorts of shadows on it, because it's the setting sun. And there's also this interplay of the cooler shadows, the cooler greens, and the warmer greens in the back, and I think that's an interesting juxtaposition, really. But damn, the surface is challenging. I had this same problem with my wood panels. When I first started, I took advice from, gosh, what's his name? I don't remember. Another painter on YouTube, and he was using cover stain Zinsser for ground on wood panels. And I've tried that same method, but gosh, I have a painting from a year ago now, I believe. Yeah, the one called Finland, Sun and Snow in Oulu, Finland. That one is painted on an experimental wood panel. And then another one with Moscow Church of Christ the Savior. That one is painted. Again, I used Zinsser for ground. And I just discovered something. I just figured that it's not quite for me because the surface is too smooth. And I don't like it this way. I like it when I actually don't sand down my canvas when it's dried. I like it when it's more abrasive, because I love to put down this, to put down some paint in the underpainting. And I like how I can scrub off the paint off the brush using the surface of the canvas. And when it's more abrasive, it's kind of easier to do that. When it's more glittery and smooth, it becomes a little bit more problematic, and the whole feel of painting changes. So I like it when there's some graininess to at least the initial bottom layer of the painting. I like it when it has more tooth. That's the word I'm looking for. I like it when it has more tooth. It's somewhat easier to paint, at least for me. And I like to paint wet into wet. In bigger paintings, of course, I have sometimes areas which kind of dry out, sort of, a little bit. And then I paint over. I use glazing to a limited extent. So sometimes I have like an area that dried out substantially, and then I'm painting over it and adding some shading or some light effects. But regardless, I mean, everybody's different in that regard, and some people like less tooth, and I guess it's fine for them, and some people like more tooth. I considered adding more marble dust to the Zinsser primer, but then I just thought, no, I don't quite like it. Still something is wrong. It's different from the traditional ground. I like the traditional ground, but I also like to mix in some raw pigment, some dry pigment, to tone it. And sometimes it gives a toothier surface, and sometimes it's pretty medium as far as the tooth. But in the case with these experimental panels, I felt that there is no tooth at all. Like, it's just, the brush just keeps gliding over the canvas, and I don't have that grip on the surface, and it felt weird. Because, you know, putting thicker paint, I was kind of forced to put thicker paint earlier in the painting process, and I didn't quite want to do that. I wanted to just stick to more kind of washed out textures and broader brush strokes, but, you know, here we go. So this is very experimental, really. I like how it turned out, though, and I hope you like it too. That being said, thank you for being with me, and you will hear me next time. Ciao.